Hey, friends, it's Casey Love, Courageous Casey. Tonight, I wanted to riff a little bit on stigma, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. What does stigma mean to you? And the reason I was thinking about this is today I saw my therapist over the internet, over Zoom, or actually telehealth thing. And I know that for a lot of people, like the idea of admitting that they're seeing a therapist they feel like there's a stigma to that. And I started thinking about all the different areas of my life. I mentioned last week I went on a Phoenix bike ride, which is a rise, recover, sober, active community. And they talk a lot about, reducing stigma around addiction. If you think about it, I bet you everybody who's watching this or who knows me has some form of addiction in their family, whether it's themselves or someone else, like a relative, a sibling, an in-law, a friend, a neighbor. We're all affected by addiction. And, even recovery, like I'm coming up on a lot of years and yet still, people hear recovery or they, want to know if you were an AA or NA and were you an alcoholic or a drug addict. And there's this stigma, there's this label. And, some of the other stigmas I feel like that I sometimes am subject to is like, I'm very woo-woo. People could say very woo-woo. I believe in metaphysical. I study Eastern philosophy and religion. I have a very different way of thinking. And, even my ADHD, I like to call it like my neurotypical brain. So I looked up the definition of stigma. And I remember a friend of mine once saying that he likes to look up words too. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not the only one, which really made me think about how like part of stigma, I think, is that we want to belong. And stigma is like those other people who don't belong. And so when I looked up the word stigma, I saw things like disgrace, defect, or disease, and or marked, like that used to mark criminals or slaves with it was a stigma, like a branding them. And the origins of the word stigma go back to like a tattoo as a result of an action, like you're tattooed or labeled, like physically. Showing almost like the scarlet letter, right? And it's so interesting because, I just recently found out that there's someone in my life who thinks that I'm a bad mom, and it's part of the family. And, I realized that it doesn't really, it bothers me a little bit, but it doesn't really bother me because I know that I'm a good mom. And I actually talked to my daughter about it, and she's like, oh my gosh, Mom, you are the best mom. And she's 14, so she won't admit that to you. But in the privacy of our home, she'll occasionally say that. And for your own child to say that, that has been the one area of my life that has been the most important area for me to really excel at is being a good mom. And my mom is a great mom. And, we have very different parenting styles. And I learned a lot from her in many different ways. And, this particular person who thinks I'm a bad mom is what I would say a controlling mom, which I don't think is a good mom. But, the part of that is because of the stigmas, because I've been divorced, because I've been in recovery. Well, guess what? I have learned from those things. And I assume you have too. If you've got areas in your life, that's why we go to therapy. That's why we work on letting go of those labels. Like we are not the identities that we think we are, that other people put on us. We are evolving, changing people. I really believe that we are either growing or we are dying. There's no way to stay in the middle. And that's in all ways, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And trauma is another area of my life. I can't help the trauma that I went through, but it shaped me in so many ways. And in our society, like mental health is not valued. Like we value physical health. Our mental health system is really screwed up, and our prison system and our justice system. I mean, the people that are in prison, and you have to watch 13 if you haven't had it, the 13. Amazing movie talking about how really slavery evolved into, putting people of color in the prison system, because then they could treat them as slaves because they were criminals. They really weren't criminals, but certain people controlled it, so it looked that way. And a lot of those people in the system have had a lot of trauma. They have not been treated. They've not gotten the support that they need from an economic standpoint, from a health standpoint. And, I'm kind of a lower middle class person. And I know that if my entire life fell apart, I'd still have my family. I'm still taken care of. But many people don't have that. And therefore, because of economics or because of mental health or different things, there's a stigma placed upon them. And in our society, we kind of sweep people under the rugs. And, I think that's part of why I am just practicing my courage in speaking out and continuing to share my thoughts. And they're not perfect, and they're not always articulating exactly the way I'd like them to be, but it's communicating from the heart. And I would love to see more and more of us do that. So I want to hear what you have to say. I would love share a comment. Be brave, do a video, leave me a video comment. Just do a video on your phone and then upload it, or reach out to me. Let's do some conversation together on some of these topics. I'm going to kind of go back through the last 10 days, and today's day 10, and just kind of label them a little more, and also working on planning ahead topics. So if you have something you want to chat about, let's talk about it, but really stuff from the heart. So I'd love to hear your heart and what's going on, because we spend so much time in our heads. Let's come from our hearts. Let's be in our hearts where there's love and compassion, because compassion makes us good people, right? It's not all about the intellect. It's about compassion as well. So I hope you have a beautiful moment. Thanks for watching and listening. Namaste. And play. Bye.